Our debate focuses on the use of punishment in applied behavior analysis. The members of our group are Ryan Jones, Allison King, Morgan Sandelin, Ashley Vaught, and Catherine Moore. Morgan and Ryan will be on the pro side team. Allison and Ashley are on the con side team. The moderator for this debate is Catherine. Before we start the debate, we'll first discuss what punishment is in relation to applied behavior analysis. Punishment is used to decrease the likelihood that the target behavior will occur in the future. Punishment is separated into two categories: positive punishment and negative punishment. Positive punishment involves adding something into the environment, typically something that is aversive, which in turn decreases the likelihood that the behavior will occur in the future. It is important to note that something that is aversive to one client may not be aversive to another. Negative punishment involves removing something from the environment, which results in a decrease of future behaviors. Whatever is removed from the environment is typically something that is reinforcing to the client. This is relevant to the field of ABA because punishment can be used to decrease problem behaviors. This is often something that behavior analysts are looking to do. According to Ethics Code 4.8, behavior analysts should always use reinforcement before punishment. However, punishment procedures may be necessary. If it is determined that punishment procedures are needed, there are several guidelines that the Ethics Code outlines for how this should be handled. These guidelines include using reinforcement procedures for alternative behaviors, ensuring the appropriate steps have been taken to implement reinforcement strategies, and also ensuring that aversive procedures are used only with sufficient training, supervision, and oversight. Throughout this presentation, we will address more ways that punishment can be used and how it is important to the field of ABA. Punishment also relates to several core principles. One of the main core principles that comes to mind in relation to punishment is do no harm. Behavior analysts must ensure that they are not harming the client when implementing punishment procedures. This requires that the analysts are properly trained and only using punishment procedures when it is deemed necessary. We also will be following several rules for our debate. The pro and con sides will present their arguments in regard to the use of punishment. The opposite sides will also have the chance to attack the other side. During the debate, it is expected that all debaters speak to each other in a professional and respectful manner and discuss their side of the argument in relation to empirical evidence. Each debater will be respectful of their time frame and not interrupt others who are speaking.
Although reinforcement is always the first choice, there are times when punishment is a necessary intervention, especially in the cases of reducing aggressive or self-injurious behavior. Punishment procedures are necessary when reinforcement procedures are not successful in changing behavior. Punishment should not be among the first few intervention options when developing a behavior change program, but the pro side is here to argue that it is a necessary option in some cases when dangerous behaviors are present. The ACB Compliance Code 4.08b backs the statement up in saying that if punishment procedures are necessary, behavior analysts always include reinforcement procedures for alternative behaviors in the behavior change program. When punishment is used, it should be used with extreme caution. Situations when punishment should be used are to teach some skills, including how to say no, to prevent the experience of critical danger to all involved, and to put a stop to undesired behavior. In addition, punishment has been proven to be an effective tool when used in conjunction with reinforcement and extinction. Timeout is a negative punishment procedure that involves the loss of access to positive reinforcers for a brief period of time contingent on the problem behavior. Studies on timeouts have proven that the result is a decrease in the future probability of the problem behavior. Whenever implementing a punishment procedure, it is most effective when there is also a differential reinforcement procedure such as a DRO or DRA in place. For example, a timeout procedure decreases the rate of problem behavior, and the differential reinforcement procedure increases an alternative behavior to replace the problem. Timeout procedures without the use of a differential reinforcement procedure are likely to result in a net loss in reinforcement, and the problem behavior could likely reemerge. Considerations to be made when using a timeout procedure are whether or not the problem behaviors are maintained by positive reinforcement involving social or tangible reinforcers. If yes, then this would be appropriate. And if the problem behaviors are maintained by negative reinforcements or social or sensory stimulation, it would be an inappropriate procedure to put in place. Response cost is the removal of a specified amount of a reinforcer contingent on the occurrence of problem behavior. If a response cost is being used to decrease problem behavior, DRA should be in place to increase desirable alternative behavior, or a DRO should be in place to reinforce the absence of the problem behavior. Punishment is a necessary part of the learning process. It is a critical aspect of human life, especially in education, and it is one of the core principles of behavior. When used appropriately, punishment is effective and ethical. Skinner defines punishment as a consequence to behavior wherein removal of a desired reinforcer or presentation of an aversive stimulus leads to a decreasing in engagement in that problem behavior.
Boyd states that from a theoretical point of view, punishment has no special value other than being a way to decrease a behavior problem. If positive or non-aversive techniques can accomplish the same goal while being more humane, they should be considered first. There are many positive reinforcement-based procedures to decelerate a behavior. The first is differential reinforcement. Differential reinforcement involves differentially reinforcing a behavior other than the inappropriate behavior. There are three types of differential reinforcement. 1. The DRO, differential reinforcement of other behaviors. 2. The DRI, differential reinforcement of incompatible behaviors. 3. DRL, differential reinforcement of low levels of responding. The next positive reinforcement-based procedure is extinction. Extinction is a non-aversive procedure to decelerate behaviors by eliminating the reinforcer that maintains that behavior. The next positive reinforcement-based procedure is corrective feedback. Corrective feedback works by giving information back to a person by indicating whether or not the person made a correct or incorrect response. The next positive reinforcement-based procedure is using peers as models. This is done by reinforcing appropriate behavior of models among peer groups. A person can learn by seeing the way another person acts. The next positive reinforcement-based procedure is satiation. Satiation works by continuously reinforcing a behavior until the behavior decreases. The last positive reinforcement-based procedure is rearranging the environment, altering or restricting the cues that become the occasion for the behavior to occur.
Any debate aimed at determining the ethical use of punishment must first aim to define punishment. According to B.F. Skinner, punishment is a consequence to a behavior wherein removal of a desired reinforcer or presentation of an aversive stimulus leads to a decrease in engagement in that behavior. Punishment can therefore be thought of as a procedure used in the learning of behavior. Although punishment may, for many, conjure images and thoughts due to the connotation associated with the word, this shouldn't act as an indictment against the use of punishment for teaching purposes. Although reliance on reinforcement procedures is preferable in pretty much all instances, there are instances where punishment is warranted, especially in the case of reducing dangerous behaviors when reinforcement and extinction procedures alone are not successful in producing an immediate change in behavior. In such instances, punishment may both be justified and actually required to help benefit the individual. So in terms of benefiting others, there may be a reliance on punishment procedures at times for those reasons. For this reason, stating that punishment should not be used does a disservice to the field of behavior analysis. Punishment is also one of the principles of behavior, and as such, in certain instances, use of punishment procedures is both ethical and warranted, as it helps benefit others and prevents harm from being done. There are two most basic forms of punishment. There's positive punishment, where an aversive stimulus is introduced and that leads to a reduction in behavior, and then there's also negative punishment, where removal of a preferred stimulus results in a decrease in behavior. As stated, punishment is one of the principles of behavior. It is foundational to behavior analysis, and when implemented correctly, it can help lead to a reduction in maladaptive behaviors. And for this reason, it can be seen as a very important teaching procedure when reinforcement and extinction procedures alone are not sufficient in teaching necessary behavior changes. There's several principles behavior and not the person. Punishment needs to be consistent. It should occur immediately or as close to immediately as possible after the occurrence of the behavior being punished. Punishment should avoid being too severe, and it should also provide the individual being punished with potential alternative replacement behavior. Implementation of these key aspects of punishment can help ensure punishment has desired effect on behavior without becoming too severe or aversive for the person who is undergoing the punishment procedure. It should also be noted that just like with reinforcement procedures, punishment procedures can be faded. Just like with many of our programming goals, we want to teach to mastery and to generalization. It's important that teaching procedures can be faded out. A study by Donaldson and Vollmer demonstrated how implementation of timeout procedures resulted in decrease in problem behavior for all of the participants in the study. Use of punishment procedures such as timeout can be faded. An experiment conducted by Donaldson and Vollmer demonstrated how the schedule of timeout procedures could also be successfully thinned, which has lasting implications as it shows that punishment may be effective, but it can also be thinned out and ultimately reduced. If implemented correctly, other such punishment procedures may be thinned out, so that benefits the client and also demonstrates the effectiveness of these procedures as teaching methodologies. Another reason to defend the use of punishment in certain situations is that punishment is often an important consequence to behavior in naturally occurring settings. Natural consequences shape behavior for individuals of all ages. For instance, an individual at a young age may learn to avoid touching a hot stove as a result of the pain that occurs after touching the stove or an item on the stove. Individuals slipping and falling while running on wet or icy surfaces can also teach individuals to be more cautious under similar circumstances. Punishment also occurs in natural settings such as the job or in school settings. Engagement in certain behaviors can result in punishment in the form of demerit, suspension, or even demotion. And similarly, behaving in a manner that prevents an individual from performing at an expected level may result in removal of privileges or other forms of punishment. With punishment serving such a prominent educative role in natural settings, it stands to reason that in certain circumstances, implementation of punishment procedures can have an educative effect for individuals in contrived settings as well. Moreover, a history of punishment for engagement in certain behaviors may actually serve as a deterrent for individuals in similar circumstances in the future. Although punishment as a consequence for behavior is not an ideal consequence, there are situations where it may be warranted, and under proper supervision, punishment can be integral in learning desired, socially acceptable behavior for individuals. To completely avoid the use of punishment could prevent the best outcomes of clients. Having said that, there still is reason to question the ethics of implementing punishment procedures. Punishment should not be the first choice in an intervention. The Behavior Analyst Certification Board, or BACB, provides a framework for professionals in regards to the use of punishment procedures. According to Ethical Compliance Code 4.08, there are several caveats regarding the use of punishment. First, according to Code 4.08a, reinforcement should be used prior to punishment. Moreover, Code 4.08b states that reinforcement for alternative behaviors must be used in conjunction with punishment when punishment is deemed effective. Code 4.08c states that reinforcement procedures must be utilized prior to implementation of punishment unless the severity of the behavior necessitates implementation of punishment more quickly. Finally, Code 4.08d notes the importance of an increased level of training and ongoing supervision when punishment procedures are implemented, while noting a plan regarding discontinuation of punishment procedures must be included when punishment is actually implemented. So while Code 4.08 is very clear in that punishment should not be the first choice and that there are, again, several caveats that must be in place for the use of punishment procedures, it does justify and provide parameters wherein punishment may be used and the ethics behind the use of those punishment procedures. The code also specifically notes that there may be instances where punishment procedures may be needed more early than initially recommended, depending on the severity of the given problem behavior. So to argue that punishment is unethical is, under any circumstance, is essentially contradictory to Code 4.08, which does justify the use of punishment under the right set of circumstances. Again, the pro side is not arguing that punishment is the preferred method of teaching or the preferred behavioral principle to rely on. And we're also not arguing that punishment should be the first choice, but the argument is present that there are times when punishment is justified. Moreover, if there are instances where punishment is warranted per the BACB, punishment itself should be considered a justifiable practice in given circumstances. To completely remove the use of punishment would be an argument against punishment in any circumstances. Conversely, an argument for the use of punishment is not, again, saying that it needs to be used, but only that in certain cases it may be used.
The opposition discussed aspects that influence the effectiveness of punishment, including the immediate delivery, thinning appropriately, and ultimately completely fading the procedure out. If not following these strategies properly, the probability of negative side effects increase. The most common negative side effects of incorrect implementation of punishment procedures include an increased rate of aggression, new behaviors associated with the function of escape, an increased rate of problem behaviors outside the punishment condition, teaching the client what not to do as opposed to what behaviors they should be engaging in. As mentioned earlier, there are many strategies, including differential reinforcement, which include DRO, DRA, and DRI, extinction, corrective feedback, using peers as models, satiation, and rearranging the environment. Depending on the topography, using one or a combination of these strategies are proven effective in decreasing maladaptive behavior absent of using any type of punishment procedures. I will discuss one example of a less intrusive method called extinction to decrease high-magnitude self-injurious behaviors. A research study done in 2003 by Yang examined 2 female adolescents with a severe developmental delay. These females engaged in severe self-injurious behavior that led to medical treatment due to tissue damage. A functional analysis determined that the function was attention, and analysts chose to utilize attention extinction. Prior to the implementation of attention extinction, a punishment procedure was being implemented. The strategy used was the use of restrictive gear, including elbow braces, to prevent the adolescent to reach up to scratch or hit her head. This also limited mobility for adaptive behaviors and had the potential to create further isolation from peers. In baseline A, shown in the graph, the self-injurious behaviors were not observed due to the intrusive restraint mechanism. In condition B, attention extinction was implemented. As you can see, there was an extinction burst for each adolescent, but within 6 months, their self-injurious behavior was extinguished. This demonstrates that using less intrusive strategies and leaving out punishment has the ability to decrease high-magnitude behaviors and increase adaptive behavior due to less intrusive methods.
The Behavior Analyst Certification Board, or the BACB, compliance codes state that clients have a right to a safe and humane treatment, least restrictive environment, and the right to effective treatment. The improper implementation of punishment procedures pose a risk for violating all of these ethical codes. Punishment procedures, including timeout or isolation, cannot guarantee that everyone involved is physically safe and respected. While there is not a comprehensive list in the ethical code that states what humane treatment involves, it should include safety and dignity for those involved. As mentioned previously, reinforcement must be utilized and proven ineffective in reducing behavior before more intrusive methods, including punishment procedures. Clients have a right to the least intrusive method. The restrictiveness of the intervention must be examined in correlation to the amount of time to have desired clinical outcomes. Positive behavior sports, or PBS, is a technique used to decrease problem behaviors. As with applied behavior analysis, PBS has a primary focus on improving the lives of individuals that it serves. PBS focuses on teaching new behaviors to replace the maladaptive or problem behaviors. PBS has been tried on cases where punishment procedures have not worked. This technique should be considered before using punishment. The Lavigny article states there are many cases saying that after punitive punishment has failed and they have tried PBS and levels on self-injurious behaviors have severely lowered, and in some cases the level of self-injurious behaviors have been eliminated. PBS can be used with high rates of of behaviors. For example, in the Livignon and Willens article, 1992 Type 3 case study, the self-injurious behavior was occurring approximately 50 times per hour when the PBS plan was initiated. Upon full implementation of the PBS plan, self-injurious behavior had essentially been eliminated. Since individuals' peer behaviors are sometimes in an institutional setting, PBS has been used in both the community and institutional setting and can be used with high and low rates of behavior and with lower high-intensity behaviors.
In defending the use of punishment, it should be noted that the pro side is not advocating for punishment as a replacement for use of the previously mentioned reinforcement-based strategies, including differential reinforcement procedures and the implementation of positive behavior support systems. Rather, the pro side is stating that there are instances wherein punishment is not only appropriate, but also effective and potentially necessary. As previously stated, the BACB allows for implementation of punishment procedures under a certain set of circumstances, when the necessary situation arises, or when implementation of reinforcement-only based procedures proves ineffective in leading to change in socially significant behavior, punishment may be warranted. These stipulations may need to be present in order for punishment to be implemented, but they do allow for implementation of punishment under the necessary set of circumstances. Since an argument for the use of punishment is being made only under certain circumstances, it stands to reason the BACB's Ethical Compliance Code regarding the use of punishment, 4.08, and it also supports the use of punishment in behavior modification. It may be that a high degree of opposition to punishment comes from the connotation associated with it. The word punishment may conjure certain images and thoughts, skewing the perception of punishment from its behavioral definition to that of a less pleasant association. Moreover, this common misperception of punishment may influence some professionals, leading them to reject its implementation, even when warranted, per the BACB Code of Ethics. However, a recent study surveying the opinions held by behavior analysts on punishment, yielding a wide range of results, suggested that professionals are completely against the use of punishment due to issues regarding ethics or efficacy and lacking credibility. The lack of research regarding efficacy of punishment procedures, as well as opinions of those implementing punishment procedures, would suggest further research into implementation of punishment procedures is warranted. While punishment should not be the first intervention chosen during the behavior change program, there are certain instances where it is warranted for the sake of the client. These may be instances where the client or those in the immediate environment are in danger, as well as instances wherein reinforcement-only procedures have not yielded the desired effect on socially significant behavior. Punishment should only be implemented in certain situations as outlined by the BACB, but the BACB, as well as surveys of behavior analysts, would seem to support the use of punishment under certain sets of circumstances.
As previously stated, an argument against the use of punishment would suggest punishment is never ethically defensible or appropriate. However, there are circumstances warranting the use of punishment, as previously outlined by the pro side. Conversely, the argument can be made that never using punishment, regardless of the situation, could prove unethical. According to Ethical Compliance Code 2.0, and I quote, "Behavior analysts have a responsibility to operate in the best interest of clients. As such, there may be times where not only is punishment the most effective intervention to implement, but it may be necessary to implement as a behavior analyst's responsibility to the client. In the case of very harmful or dangerous self-injurious or aggressive behavior, implementation of punishment procedures may be necessary for the safety of the client, noting that it's not just the individual engaging in the behavior, but it may also involve other individuals such as family members or others in the immediate environment. Moreover, behavior analysts must rely on scientific knowledge. According to Code 1.01, and I quote, "Behavior analysts rely on professionally derived knowledge based on science and behavior analysis when making scientific or professional judgments in human service provision or when engaging in scholarly or professional endeavors." The science supports implementation of punishment in certain instances due to its reductive effect on behavior. In the pursuit of excellence, as well as in an ability and a responsibility to prevent harm, punishment may be necessary in some instances. An argument against the use of punishment in any circumstances can be seen as negligent and potentially dangerous. This is especially of note when discussing behaviors that pose an immediate danger to the client, or to others in the environment. Failure to act immediately in order to implement a consequence reducing severe problem behavior such as response blocking, which it should be noted, response blocking is technically a punishment procedure, can prove detrimental to a client as well as to others in the environment. For this reason, failure to acknowledge the effective use of punishment procedures should be seen as negligent. Condemnation of use of punishment across all individuals, regardless of the behavior or circumstances, can also equally be considered a violation of the ethical compliance codes as outlined.
In defending the use of utilizing other methods to decrease problem behaviors before punishment, we are not stating that punishment is against ethical codes, but rather that other methods should first be utilized in accordance to these ethical codes. The opposition stated that research defending the effectiveness of punishment lacks credibility, and therefore more research is warranted for the use of punishment. As research is being done on both the effectiveness and ethical implications behind punishment, it should be used among clients sparingly and only when analysts have exhausted other methods that include reinforcement and other strategies. One aspect missed by the opposition was the effective use of conducting punisher assessments, which should be included in ensuring that punishment is effective. This procedure is similar to conducting a reinforcer assessment, which determines this effectiveness of the punisher. It's also important to note that the side effects of punishment need to be closely monitored when using a punishment procedure. The behavior for reduction will be monitored, but it's often left out that the side effects associated with punishment are being monitored. These behaviors should be closely monitored as other maladaptive behaviors are shown to have an increase when punishment is implemented, specifically with aggression and escape maintained behaviors.
In conclusion, like many other procedures used in ABA, punishment has a time and place. Due to the fact that punishment involves either presenting an aversive stimulus or removing something that is reinforcing, there are specific guidelines outlined for the use of punishment. Practitioners in ABA should be fully trained in the use of punishment procedures, have utilized various reinforcement procedures prior to the implementation of punishment in order to correct problem behavior, and continue to monitor the progress being made whenever punishment is determined to be necessary. Thank you for watching our presentation, and we wish everyone the best of luck in their future.